Hi guys, this week I'm gonna be a lot nicer to Hodinkee because they did a lot of really good stuff for us. I do have a lot of respect for what they did, and that's what I'm gonna cover today. I'm gonna cover the parts that are really important for me, especially the vintage part. They did a lot to the market. They did a lot of teaching, they did a lot of preparation for people to actually buy vintage, and they were actually highlighting pieces that we've never seen before because they were digging in places that I never looked at, and a lot of people didn't either. So that's a very good point about Hodinkee. They were doing an amazing job of searching or finding and exposing the best out there, may they be cheap or very expensive watches. I'm going to also talk about a few watches that are in my personal collection that were highly influenced by Hodinkee and by what they were doing, and it's a bit part of me and my love for watches as well. Therefore, everything that they did had a huge influence on me, and I believe on millions of other people in the world. Let's dig in and let's see what they did at their best of the best. From what I see, a lot of people are complaining about the gatekeeping of the community. And actually, Hodinkee did the exact opposite. They opened the doors to a new world for people to explore, to discover. And for me, it was amazing to see how many watches were there, how much information, how much history, how many wars were fought with those watches, and so on and so forth. For a very long time, the center focus of Hodinkee was about divers and a lot of the neo vintage that we needed to discover. Being in Canada and having been born in Europe and living here for over 30 years now, I have discovered what was basically here because I lived here since I was a kid. Therefore, I never was in contact with Italian watches, let's say Swiss German, with anything from England, from France. We did have a bit, we have a lot of immigrants, for example, from France that came to Montreal, but we were never as much in contact with a lot of the brands from Europe, for example. A lot of stuff was also in Asia or distributed in Asia only, or in North Africa only. We're talking of specific dials, we're talking of many, many things out there. Therefore, Hodinkee did a very good job making us discover all those neo-vintage or vintage pieces from everywhere in the world. And most of them were also available to be purchased because they were putting links to listings from the time. I can also say that I was actually highlighted by Hodinkee, I believe in 2015, with a Tudor 7159 Monte Carlo. And it was super fun. People told me, hey, you're on Hodinkee. I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, I think that's your watch. And actually it was mine, and it was super fun. That's what made Hodinkee very interesting for me. It's the fact that they were just going after people, highlighting them with nothing in return. They never reached out to me. They never asked me to do anything in return. And what happened is that I actually sold it to a guy locally, and he discovered me through Hodinkee himself, and he became a very good friend of mine. Therefore, Hodinkee created friendships, created relations, created so many things that we were never thinking about, including what I'm doing with you guys right now. It's what we're doing is creating that connection that no one ever thinks about when it comes to the passion that we all have. And this is what Hodinkee has done for a very, very long time. With all the connections, with everything that they did, obviously there's also the economical part of the whole market. What they did is a new way of marketing pieces in a way that we're never seeing it before, where people were actually looking on eBay or the early beginnings of Chrono 24 or any other platforms out there that we didn't really, all look at them. For example, forums or individual websites where people were selling their watches. Hodinkee actually created a hype around certain models because as soon as something got featured, it went crazy in price. And that's what happens more and more with Mike Nouveau and with many other dealers out there who are very prominent on the market and who are showcasing pieces that you've never seen before, including brands that have just skyrocketed, like Cartier, one of them that I was never thinking that, basic ETA movement, Cartier would be worth 10, 15, $20,000 right now. For me, it just doesn't make any sense from, from a technical point of view, but it's true that those watches are rare and the demand is there, and the market has glorified those watches to a level that we cannot even fathom right now. With that spotlight effect from Hodinkee and everything that made those watches grow in value and in price, obviously you have a lot of volatility as well, because some people might be hooked to what the demand is and might want to buy the watch the highest of the market. And what does that do is that when the cooling off moment comes, obviously your watch is going to come down in value. That's what happens most of the time right now with modern watches, because that's how it is. Every time a new watch comes to the market, from Rolex, from AP, from Vacheron, from any other brand out there that's limited, when those watches are spotlighted by companies and people just go ahead and they all want to fight for those watches, what they don't realize is that in a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, most of them are just going to cool off and come back to reality. And in a way, Hodinkee did this very well with vintage. They did this very well with their limited editions. But in the end, you have to keep yourself very cool to this market, and there's good and bad things about them, because you will discover things that you've never seen before. But at the same time, if too many people are excited about what they're showcasing, you might get into the hot waters, and if you're not ready to lose some money, well, obviously it is not an investment in most cases. You have to balance what Hodinkee created, and now it's almost the norm of the market where everything is hyped up, everything is put in a spotlight, and you will be the one paying the price. What did Hodinkee create as well? It created a lot of awareness of the market. They did create a very high demand for watches, but then they created some rules around how to buy watches. The most important behavior that you have to have is know the watches you're going to buy, and that's why I always tell people, educate yourselves, do your own due diligence, because even if you're buying from me, I might make mistakes. You might know the watch better than I do, and you might spot that little mistake I might have made, or any other dealer out there, up to a redial or anything that could go above and beyond what's normally accepted in this market. There's a big part of vintage relating to nostalgia. A lot of people want to have the watch that their father had, their grandfather had. I meet a lot of people whose story is that they inherited the watch from their parents or grandparents, and sadly it got lost or it got stolen. And I've heard that story not one time, but many, many times so far. And buying that watch back is part of the nostalgia or part of your personal or family history, and buying something similar to what you have purchased back in the time, or your parents, or what you had, is part of your own personal history. It's very important that you buy a watch knowing what you're actually buying. It's not only a price, it's not only a good looking watch just in the pictures. I do have a lot of experience spotting redials and spotting anything that might be wrong with a watch in a few seconds, because I see a tremendous amount of watches every single day through pictures, even through a blurry picture. I can kind of scan it, if you want to say, and there's always something that will pop up in my mind that will say, hey, that's a red flag. You don't have that experience, especially if you don't see watches every day and you're looking to buy 1 or 2 watches in your lifetime. Well, then you still have to do your due diligence, as Hodinkee says. I'm not scaring you off. It's just reading and being a bit more informed about the purchase that you will do. And Hodinkee created the book of rules in a way, where you're going to have multiple articles talking about what's good and what's bad about a watch. I'll let you discover that online. You'll have quite a bit of fun reading about it. But this is kind of the basics of watches. Some people might accept a polished watch. Some people might accept a recut watch, where a lot of people don't understand the term, is that you're adding material, laser welding, new material to the watch. It's never gonna show, but then you're just gonna basically cut bring back the watch to its original shape or very close to it, and you're going to mimic a watch that's almost new old stock. A lot of dealers out there are doing that. That wasn't really part of what Hodinkee used to review 10 years ago or 12, 14 years ago, but now it's part of what we're doing as well. So be aware that a lot of people are doing that right now, and they're starting with destroyed cases or very damaged cases. They're replating them. That's kind of the basic restoration, up to welding and, you know, restoring much more than you might think. Is that accepted? A lot of dealers are doing it. A lot of people are going there, but Hodinkee, I don't think they talked about it so far. I didn't find anything talking about that, but you might look into it. Just want to ask you guys a bit of a pause on the video. I want to ask you how much of an influence Hodinkee was and how much is it now versus what it was before. Or have you discovered Hodinkee with my video and you're going to look it up, and then please comment. I want to hear about it. Now we understand that Hodinkee has broken all the rules of gatekeeping. They have helped people get into the market. They gave you the rules. Now what did they do? They opened a store, even though, as we talked in the last video, Ben Clymer did not want to sell watches to begin with, but I think it was just a natural next step to the whole business and to what they were doing. They were basically connecting people that wanted to sell watches to people that wanted to buy watches. And what better platform than Hodinkee themselves to actually showcase pieces that were honest and that were trusted because they were Hodinkee and they were a pretty big game changer by that time. I would say that drastically hit me and a lot of dealers out there, because we knew what Ben Clymer had said, where he didn't want to sell watches and now they were selling them. But the quality of the vintage they had for sale was just impressive. They were, but they still are actually in New York. And the access to vintage pieces from old jewelers and old collectors and a lot of watch stores that were, you know, building inventories for decades were just knocking on their door basically. It was so easy for them to actually get inventory and post it on their website. It was really easy for New York. I wouldn't say it would have been as easy to start something like Ben Clymer did in Montreal or maybe in any other city in the world, because New York is just a central focus of wealth and of inventory of watches. If you have the chance to go on the 47th Street, I know it's a bit of a sketchy street, you're going to be dragged left and right, whatever. But if you have the chance to go, after most probably 5 or 10 minutes, your head is just going to start spinning. It's impressive to see just from the street level how much there is. Can you imagine how much there is in all those multiple levels upstairs? How many safes are full of watches and how many good things there are in just one block? Just impressive. So Hodinkee did it at the right time, at the right place, and they had access to a huge inventory of really good pieces. Would I say today the quality of the pieces are the same? I don't think as much, maybe not on the 47th Street. There's a lot of modifying watches and changing serial numbers and dealing with stolen watches and whatever. I've heard so many stories. But let's put that aside. Let's think about what people are really interested in. And the vintage market has changed tremendously because of them, and people were, I'd say for maybe 7-8 years, it was almost like the most booming business that I've ever seen for something that I actually loved. It wasn't just a passion thing, it was also something that was increasing in value, increasing in demand, and we could tell that the demand was there. Instagram appeared and all that media focused on a few pieces that were showcased by different people in Toronto, in New York, in California, in Japan. And it was always extremely impressive to see what people would have as watches, and it's very humbling to see how many dealers are out doing a very good job as well. Therefore, there was always that increase in demand, increase in people dealing with watches, people collecting, and it created a huge monster that we know today. Now it's almost a jungle. There's good and there's very bad, and we have to kind of cope with everything in between. But this is a bit of Hodinkee's doing, and that's what you have to understand. Them starting to sell watches, them starting to showcase watches, them doing all those steps, that took basically almost 15 years, with the pandemic exacerbating all of that into just a few years, condensating everything all together. And I do understand the tension that people have of looking for money all the time, and it attracted a lot of the wrong crowd as well into this whole business. A lot of people in this business, from what I see, a lot of dealers forget about the modern stuff. In the vintage world, if you don't know what you're doing, you might lose a lot of money. That's first. But not only that, you might also sell the wrong things to the wrong people, and this is what also brought this whole problem. So Hodinkee brought everything all together, but it's almost uncontrollable at the moment. The challenge right now is to actually find a common ground for everyone. Before, we had an agreement of what we had to look for, and we were kind of discovering what everything was, and it was so much information altogether. And now, with all of that put together, how do we focus on combining the knowledge that they brought to us and focusing it on the proper ideas that we have about vintage watches? That's a question I'm gonna let you answer a bit more in the comments. A lot of people are also scouring only for the best of the best. There's many dealers that are trying to do that only and only that. And there's the people in between and the consumers. And the consumer has to be treated fairly. I find that, yes, it's an open market, but we have to have the proper tools to do a proper job. And I think I have them because I dedicated part of my life doing this. But a lot of people in the industry are very new to the market. They just see a potential of making a profit, a potential of paying their bills, and putting money before everything else is kind of the wrong way of doing this. I find that there are very few companies out there that most probably will survive almost anything. Like European Watch Company, they survived so many things compared to, for example, Hodinkee, who changed hands to, again, Crown Caliber, they're tied to Hodinkee, to including Chrono 24, which bought Zeitwerk auctions in Germany, and they hit the wall themselves. There's still a lot to build in this industry, and I think that Hodinkee started doing something very, very well, but it just got lost a bit in in the chaos that we had during the pandemic. A lot of people got lost. I think that Hodinkee has done an amazing job overall. The money aspect, I'm Romanian, so we say the money is the devil's eye, and in a way it is, because you're gonna create a monster. And this is what we have right now. It's a monster that's totally uncontrollable. From Dubai to London to Paris to anywhere in the world, maybe east, west, whatever. The market is very open, and Hodinkee brought it all together. I'm not saying for everyone, but in a way, when the wheels start spinning, your name doesn't have to be there anymore necessarily. We know that it started it all. It became a market that's way bigger than we ever conceived of being, and obviously the prices are not going anywhere down. There's still a lot of people that love watches, including the people watching here, so I thank you very much for the support, and I thank you very much for listening to what I have to say. We cannot discard Hodinkee. They have created what we know of the market today, even if a lot of the small-time dealers or people that I encounter every day with the business or whatnot, they don't even talk about Hodinkee necessarily, but it's so important to understand that they are the founders of today's market. We don't need to talk about them, but they're still gonna be there for a very long time in our minds, and what they brought as a legacy to this whole market. I want to finish the video by emphasizing how important those discoveries were through their website. And I have a few pieces here that are really interesting. From a Zenith Railroad, that's extremely rare, and that's for Canada. There is Omega, Longines, Universal Genève, Bulova that created watches for the railroad. And yet Zenith and Longines are among the rarest ones out there. I only had the Longines once, but I didn't have the proper dial, so this is something extremely interesting. There's also the fact that Hodinkee has been talking a lot about Cartier. I was never really a fan, but for the past few years I'm like let me try. Let me see what that can look on my wrist. And you have here, I call this the mobster watch, which is, in fact it is. It's a Cartier that it used to be owned by a local mobster. When you think of someone dealing with crime, you don't think of him wearing such a watch, especially today when we're used to bigger watches. So it's impressive. The history of the Santos Dumont is very important. This is a two-tone iteration, the 17 to 25. It's not for sale. It's something that I bought for myself, but it's something that I enjoy, that I appreciate, and it's something that, again, Hodinkee is one of the major factors why I bought this watch. When we're looking at Universal Genève, as you know, Breitling has bought the company, or anyway, the rights to Universal Genève. I hope they're not gonna fuck it up. And here I have an Aero Compax that's been purchased from Tillier Time, friends of mine in Montreal. I bought this years ago. But the fun part, and a lot of people are so impressed about the Aero Compaxes, the tri-Compaxes with the screw back case backs, and they're so impressed about them. Look at how cool they are and blah blah blah, and how exciting they are. It's much more rare to have a snapback with a perfect dial than any other watch out there. That's why a lot of the Omegas, Zeniths, for looking at Longines from the time, any 13 ZN, 30 CHs, any classic Longines, a lot of them have aged poorly because they have snapbacks. There's no gasket here. There's no gasket and crown. So those watches age really poorly, and that's one of the watches I always wanted to have because it was featured a few times on Hodinkee. I really wanted one. Then for a lot of people, including I'd say 95% or 98% of people that know about watches, they should know about this. And it was voted by Hodinkee and by many people out there as the best movement of the 20th century. And a lot of people don't realize that the 135 caliber by Zenith is the best caliber that was made back in the 40s and the 50s. It has all the history about it. You can check. I'm not going to give it all to you, but this is a very importantly historic watch in every single way. And the Zenith 135 was not voted by watchmakers and by people that like watches for no reason. Have to look it up. It's very important. It's one of, if not the most important watch out there, I'd say, in the classic watches. They're never looking like anything. They're maybe even hidden in a Sporto 2000 watch, and no chronometer on the dial, no nothing. Just the simplest watch out there. Then you have a jewel hidden inside. The movement is just spectacular. I'm not gonna keep on ranting about this, but it's very important. You have to look it up. Then anything, for example, I have a local gentleman here in Montreal who sold me this watch. So this is a triple signed Patek. It's quite rare with the Breguet numerals, with leaf hands, enamel dial. The enamel is far from being perfect. You know, we're talking early 20s with very small dials, obviously not the enamel dials that we know today from pocket watches that are much bigger. Even those, they're not ever perfect. But those are the kind of watches that Hodinkee would feature. Watches that you never see, watches that are really impressive. And again, it's not a matter of the price. It's not a matter of how necessarily important the watch is, even historically. Sometimes it's just the looks. Sometimes it's just a different name on the watch itself. Obviously, it ties up the history, but just makes those watches unique and makes them fun. And that's what Hodinkee brought us to the market. It brought us fun. Hodinkee is the underdog. That one thing that you expect the least and that does the most for you. The fun of discovering a new watch every time. The fun of discovering a little detail on every single watch. And that's curiosity. And I hope you guys have it, because there's a lot to read upon Hodinkee. There's a lot to discover, even from old things they wrote 10-15 years ago. Thank you very much for reaching the end of the video. If you do like the video, please comment Riri Burks. People who know will know. Thank you for following. If you did like the video, please subscribe and like the video. And please comment, what's your experience with Hodinkee? What's the letdown? What's your biggest discovery? The good and the bad. I want to hear all about it. Thank you again for watching. Have a great week.